In this video help tutorial, we're going to do an overview of the Data Safe Harbor database application. This application, to start out with, is a secure, safe data storage and information management system. What is that? A database management system takes information, as you can see on this screen, and it's going to use the internet website logins, application logins, bank logins, insurance company information, investments, and safe access. We'll cover those in detail in the coming up videos, but what I want to point out is some of the usage of this application. Currently, we're on what is called the Data Manager screen, and I'm going to pop over here and drop the menu option down. This is a single-click application menu where basically what you do is you just click once and it takes you to any of the screens shown in here. In this overview, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the individual things that are in this application. We're on the Data Manager screen, which is the second one in line here. The first screen is for the video help tutorials like the one you're watching right now. The video help tutorials go through each screen and give you a brief, or if not detailed, look at each one of the screens and the details of what is put into those screens and why. In this overview, what we're going to be doing is looking basically at the main screen, which is the Data Manager screen, that includes several other screens in it that are popover screens. And basically, if you click on them, they come up and they allow you to present data. And the data has the fields for each one of those levels of information and a notes field and a portal where the actual record is kept. This is a portal record right here, a multi-line portal where multiple records can be added. If you just hold on and bring up, you can see that you can scroll through as many records that are added in here. The information that's added is added into the fields but stored in the portal, so the individual records are in a portal. If I went to the portal and looked at it, you would see that that same information is actually in the portal for that record, the individual record. And if you do, and we'll go into this later and show this, if you do a find, you start a find and perform a find, you can use any of these fields in a portal individual record to search for data that is in these records. And when I say these records, I mean any record in the system. Let's go back to the main screen, which is the Data Manager. When you start the process out, what you do is you make a determination of how many people are going to be storing data. Each person can have their own records and a primary record, which is in the Data Manager. So if I add a new user and I say new record, I'm adding a new user that has those records for that particular user, and it supports by all the information that is related over here for that particular user. The information that goes in these screens in the overview is generally the person information, so you can recognize the records themselves for that person, and then the data that they collect within these screens that represents the information that they want to secure and the information that they want to reference and use in the application. Down through the application, you're going to see where it says Data Manager List View. Well, that's a list view of all the people that have records in the accounts in this database. And the same thing for the other list view things. For example, this is a list view of all the application logins. So if you went there, you could do a search, or you could just click on a record to take you back to the applications over here login screen for a portal view of the actual individual records. Now, this goes all the way through the application for banking, insurance, internet, investments, and safe. Safe being a safe of, or one or more safes that you have data or information or even capital or precious things that are in that safe. Okay, let's go back up and cover what this thing is here. This is called the Do Action menu. A Do Action menu takes what would normally be items that are in the menus and allows you to have a drop-down list to do actions, like to start a find, to actually do a find and perform it, to show all the records after a find where you bring them all back. Typically when you do a find, one or more records are included in that find. It could be a lot of records, it could be a few. It just depends on the criteria that you put in a field. For example, if you put somebody's name in there, you're going to get all the records for that one person, which would probably be one record, unless they had multiple entries for some reason. You could do a search on any of these fields in here to find the information that's based on a date or a zip code or a city or whatever. Now, basically most people would use the name of the person, and I show example record in here. So say for example I did a look of everybody in Phoenix that is in this database. It could be one or more records. When I get done with the find and I want to go back to all the records, I would click show all, and it would return all the records back to the release, and all the list views would now show all the records. Typically, if you do a find in one area, like for example for a person's name, then you go to the person's name list view, the one up here. For example, for the data manager list view, what it would do is it would reduce the amount of information on that screen also to the person or persons that you did the find for. Same thing goes when you do that in the actual list view. You can do a find from the do action menu, and only the records that match your search criteria will be found. And that's true for any of the list views. Okay, now navigating the application, the show hide, we're not going to use that for this application. That is meant for the PC, Mac, or cloud versions of this application. Next is a next record in the list. For example, going up and down through records. If we're in this record for the data manager, it would go to the next person record in the data manager. You go to the prior, the first, and the next records. Those are ways to navigate around. There's also an omit record. Basically, in a list view, if you wanted to do a selection of records and then omit some of the records in that selection, you could just highlight any field in that row and then say omit that record, and it would omit it from the current selection of records. Then you can swing back around and say show all the omitted records and reverse that whole thing and only show the records that you omitted. So it's kind of an interesting way of doing things. In the iOS environment, export is possible. You can do an export by bringing up the screen and putting in this case, it's got the data safe records that are in here, and it has what type, and you can export to a tab, merge, HTML, Excel, database, and comma separated. Typically, most people use a tab separated, Excel, or a database to export to. CSV files are available so that if you have a mail program like Gmail or Outlook or something like that, if they take CSV files, you can take a list of people and export to that list of whatever the fields you have available, and you could take them out to an email program and use that to send out emails. Okay, so going back, fields, you can pick whatever fields you want. Now in this particular application, most of the information in here is related to this one person, so that is in this one record. But if you do a search and collect several records, then it's pertinent to all of those, where if you have name, address, city, and so forth, state, and zip, you could create a mailing list if you wanted to. The next thing we say done and go back. And the layout formatting, you could say if you do a layout formatting, what it does is it goes through the order of the way the fields are actually shown. If you wanted to do an email using the information, you could say do an email and email the information that you collected, or you could save it as a file, and that would be useful only if you were had a file format that you wanted to save to. Okay, let's go ahead and say done. Now, to be very clear, you cannot import records into an iPhone or an iPad, but you can to a Mac, Windows, or cloud application. Cloud being something on a server on the cloud where you have a live active application running. And then printing records. Printing is very simple, straightforward. You pick the records, either the current selection that you did with the find, or individual record, the current record, or a found set of records that you used to find those records. The rest of these are not usable in this area. The next thing would be the number of records you want to print, so how many copies. The page range, you can put a page range in if you want to, from to, page range, all records, in this case it's all. Page size, you have several options, plus you can set up your own custom page if you need to. Be aware that when you print from the application itself, if you have anything on the left-hand side that's equal to a 8.5 by 11 page, like all the portals are set up that way, you can print the individual page by an 8.5 by 11, and it will actually show the fields and everything, including the background. Paper size, any paper size and more. You can just do all kinds of different things with paper size. Scale, you can scale it if you have a laser printer. You can go from 25 to a custom size if you want to. Maximum DPI depends on your printer, and if you have a good printer that goes up to 600 or more, you can go ahead and set that up. And then one I really like is I can print a PDF of the screen and then view it or email the PDF or save it as a PDF file. That's pretty nice. It works really well. Okay, so let's go ahead and cancel out of here. Now, basically what I've shown you as a recap to this point is how the menus function and how you make a new record. Now, there's only one file, and the data manager it is, where you're creating a new record. All of the other screens in the application do not create new records. One of the things I want to show you when I lift this up is that you can move through fields by previous and next, or go to the top or put in a current date, current time, or current username into a field. Now, one of the next things that is really interesting about how this works is that you know that the text that you type into a field can be changed basically down here, and you just click on this and it'll put that data into the field. You can do a copy, paste. Now, if you hold down the mouse with your finger on the iPad and iOS, typically what it does is it gives you a pop-up, in this case select all, paste all text, and style. Now, style is really interesting because it allows you to edit the actual field contents and change either the color, the size of the font type. You can make it bold, italic, and underlined, but you need to say done when you're done up here, or just click off to the side if you don't want to change it. These two items here should not be used. Basically, this will add a record, this will delete a record. That is not a good way to work on this application. Use the menu options and buttons that are supplied for you. If you go ahead and add or delete a record with the screen you're looking at, you can orphan other records and cause lots of problems with the application. So do not use these. Down on the bottom over here, you'll see you can obviously use the standard keyboard. You can put the keyboard off the screen. You can delete items. And you have bold, italic, and underline also that you can put in here if you need to. Now, let me warn you about underline. In the iPad and iPhone, if you underline text, sometimes the underline will not visualize correctly. So you might want to try it and then see if it doesn't. If it looks okay, then fine. If it doesn't, then don't use it. Okay, let's drop the keyboard out of the screen. I want to point out here that there is a MID, which is the actual manager ID. And what that means is this record is a primary record in the relational database. All these screens here are tied to this screen by this ID number. If I add a new record and add a new person in here, this will numeralize one more and to go to ID number 2, and that would be a new person, and then all the records that are tied will be tied by that ID in the relationship. So for example, if I added data in a popover or in this screen, say if I went over to this popover and I added a lot of data here, then I went to another person, that would be blank because the records for that one are related by the ID number. And if it was number 2 and nothing had been put in there yet, then all of these are going to have blank fields in them until you add data. So that's how a relational database works. In this particular case, because we're using portal popovers, we're adding data and it's creating the actual portal information in the portal itself. For example, in the bank accounts, if I went to bank accounts and added the data here, then I went to the bank accounts records. That particular record would probably appear, but there's another way to do that. If you have bank account data in there and you're looking for a specific entry that you had in here, in this case it won't scroll because there's only one record, you would click on the portal and it would show the portal record for that individual record. And then while you're in here, you could go ahead and start a find, perform the find for the record you're looking for or records that you want in a set of records, and then they would appear, and then you could use the list view for the bank records right there to go to the list view to see those items that are in that particular record. Now in this case we only have one record that's available because we only have one record in the database right now. So let's go back to that main screen and I want to indicate something that is important. This application will indeed have some information that when you receive it, and we do what we call an overwrite. Basically what you do is you go in and you overwrite by taking the data that's in the fields and removing it and putting the data that you want in there. And that's true of any of the other records that are tied to ID number 1. You can go in there and overwrite all the information that's in there. But what we do is we put this in here to give you an example of records and what they look like with data in them and how they function. And I'll give you an example of that. If you are in here and you have a website URL, and this is supposed to be for CenturyLink, which is a provider, internet provider, if I click on open the website, it's going to use that URL. So it'll pop up the screen and it'll bring up the website for that particular record. As you go down through each one of the records, you'll see that information appear. So if I went to this one and I clicked open the website, I would get the Google website instead. So whatever records you actually have in the application within these screens where there's a URL and an open website button will open whatever the current record you're in. That'll open that data for you so you can see it. And you can also go to the portal, but in the portal we did not provide the open website buttons. They're only in the individual records in this screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and cap this overview. If you have any questions or you did not understand something as far as the overview is concerned, then you can contact us and you can go to the support site where we have a URL where you can go to ontargetsolutions.com, or pardon me, ontargetsolutions.biz, my mistake. So if you go there, we have a chat session you can do, or you can live chat with us, or we can do free demos on the application before you make a purchase, or anything that you have questions for, we can answer them from there on chat, or you can send us an email to vclement@gmail.com. Thank you.